Hello everyone, welcome back to my communications vlog. Today I'm going to be talking about the week 8 reading, and I'm going to be discussing the reading pop culture reading first, as usual. Now, this week's reading had 4 articles. The first was Elevate My Mind, Identities for Women in Hip Hop, Love Songs by Pamela Hollander. And this article was all about music and popular culture, how it's a way for people to express their identities. It also talked about women's role in hip hop, how the women's role in hip hop has been limited to 4 fixed archetypes that are difficult to break free from. And these were the queen mother, the fly girl, the sister with an attitude, and the lesbian. So those were the common stereotypes of women in hip hop, and that's why it's so hard for them to break out of these when there's a new artist coming into that genre. The article also discussed how the very human emotion of love in hip hop is difficult to convey, as most hip hop artists have this like tough exterior or this like a gangster persona that they have to fit into, and that archetype or that exterior makes it difficult to talk about love for fear of seeming weak. And then lastly, the article touched on feminism and female rap, how lots of female rappers express feminist messages in their music, which makes sense, as I talked about before, as female rappers had to kind of break the mold. They had to become popular in a genre of music that was originally dominated by men. The next article was Country Music, Openness to Experience and the Psychology of Culture War by Will Wilkinson. And this had a really interesting comparison between country music and conservative ideologies. It made an analogy about how country music is very isolated and on its own from all the other types of music, and how the conservatives tend to be that way as well. Country music tends to be more popular in more rural areas of the United States, such as the South, and where the conservative ideology tends to be more popular as well. They made an interesting, and the author Will Wilkinson made a really interesting point of how the country music is ultimately a roadblock against cultural change. And it's a reminder that what you see is what you get in life, because to many people, change occurring between different generations of people is alarming, and because it reminds them of the instability of life. I thought that was an interesting point. The next article was Seduced by Perfect Pitch, How Autotune Conquered Pop Music by Leslie Anderson. And this article was all about the Autotune, which is Autotune is a voice correcting software that allows anyone to sing in tune, hence Autotune. This has taken over music in recent years, and it's hard to find a modern hip-hop, R&B, or pop song that has not had its vocals doctored with the Autotune software, giving it that trademark metallic echo. You can really tell when a song's been doctored with Autotune. There's this tinny sound that's hard to hide. And many people argue that Autotune results in lazy artistry, and that the advent of a software that lets you sing out of tune is ruining music. But others say it gives opportunities to more people to become musicians, and some also argue that it provides a unique new sound to music, which is always evolving. I actually agree with this. There's a couple hip-hop artists that I like, namely Travis Scott, who kind of like T-Pain. He was kind of before my time, but like T-Pain, he uses Autotune in almost every song, and it gives him his trademark sound and trademark style. And he can sing and he can rap, but he wants his music to sound really otherworldly, almost like psychedelic. And that's why he uses the software. It makes his music sound really, really unique. Ultimately, the article talked about how Autotune allows everyone to sound their best. The next article was Riffs of Passage by Tina Vasquez, and this is all about Latino music, and how Latino music is very political, and it's often used to discuss issues that many Latinos face. Many songs tell the struggles of being an illegal immigrant in the U.S., and a lot also paint ICE as a villain. And the author, Tina Vasquez, compares her experiences as a Latina born and raised in the U.S. as an American citizen to the Latin singer Marisol Hernandez, who grew up in the U.S. undocumented with her undocumented family. She talks about how this singer, Marisol Hernandez, writes very political music, often drawing from her life experiences. She's very invested in feminism and gender equality, and her band have written songs about the disappearances of women in Mexican border towns such as Ciudad Juarez, which were controlled by the cartels for the longest time. And ultimately, the message of this article was that for immigrants, native music can really feel like home for them. It's a little taste of home, which I thought was an interesting point. Next, I'm going to talk about the rhetorical act reading, which was Chapter 5, The Resources of Argument. This is all about reasoning and the weight it can give to arguments. And the article started off by saying that no fact has any meaning by itself. Evidence on its own is useless. Evidence is really meant to be used as part of an argument, and evidence is only significant when it's incorporated into rhetorical roles or persuasive roles, where it can have an impact and be considered effective. I thought that was an interesting way to talk about evidence. There are different types of evidence, claims and reasons. A claim is an assertion. It's a kind of statement made in which the reasoning that led the speaker to that conclusion is not necessarily shown, and then reasons are the grounds on which a conclusion is drawn. They are the basis for claims, so to speak. The article also talked about issues, how an issue is a fundamental point in a dispute. It's a question crucial to the process of making a decision, choosing a side in a debate, and or selecting a course of action to be taken. And then there are generally three types of issues: questions of fact, questions of value, and questions of policy. Questions of fact are a dispute about what evidence exists and how it should be interpreted. Questions of value are a dispute about what is ethically or morally right, and then questions of policy are a dispute over a course of action, what should be done or what should be not done. The chapter talked about how the ability to reason is an essential part of an argument, which I connected to my English class. We were learning about Aristotle and how he popularized a form of reasoning called the enthymeme, which is actually talked about in this chapter. So the enthymeme is an abbreviated argument which requires participation from the audience. And then some other reasoning types that this article highlights are induction reasoning, in which a speaker lists examples in order to arrive at and argue for a larger claim. Deduction reasoning, in which a speaker presents a truth or a fact and then documents how the claim is true. Causal reasoning, which is when an argument that follows the scientific method and establishes relationships between two phenomena. And then lastly, an analogy, which is an argument that compares two phenomenon to emphasize the reader's point. And this week's pop culture reading actually had a lot of analogies between pop culture and music and the effect they can have on one another. And then in my blog post for this week, I actually made analogies between the articles and covered some similar themes and similar points that existed between them, such as feminism and women's role in music. And that's all for this week's vlog. Thank you.